Vivek sir, we can start now. Vivek sir? Soity, can you please start? I think there's some problem with Vivek sir's
Sure, we
net.
can. I see. So in that case, I allow me to welcome everybody this afternoon to IUCN's third webinar on rediscovering the wilderness of forests, and by extension, reviving responsible conservation-based tourism to create more livelihoods and reduce human-animal conflict. It's a privilege and a pleasure to be here invited for this session. Thank you so much, Dr. Saxena, Dr. Ishwar, and Anchal. And a very, very big thank you to all the panelists for being here today. We hope that we have a fantastic conversation in the coming hour. There are a lot of questions, there are a lot of answers. I hope that we'll arrive at today. So I also, I would also like to mention at this point to the audience that is watching us, if you have any queries, please write to us so that we can take those, we can ask the experts on your behalf. Of course, the lockdown, as you know, is an unimaginable disruption that has made the most vulnerable among us even more vulnerable. And it is a rather unusual opportunity, however, to also understand and map what happens exactly when we take the tourist out of the equation of conservation and forest management. Could this absence of tourism bring some of the issues of human-animal conflict into sharper focus? Could it help us speed up some of the changes that we've been wanting to make for a long, long time? Well, we don't know, not as yet, but I'm hoping that the collective wisdom of this panel today and of later perhaps of the experts in our forest communities will help us arrive at a beautiful future of tourism, even though right now I think there is a lot of distress and worry about how things will pan out. But before we begin today's webinar, let me do a quick round of introductions. With us today are Virendra Tiwari. He's the APCCF Mangrove Cell in Mumbai, also the Executive Director of Mangrove Foundation. He was also attached to the Mantralaya as APCCF and CCF until recently, apart from his past stints as Field Director at Tadoba Andhari Tiger Reserve and DCF-CF in the territorial divisions of Gondia, Parbhani, Savantwadi, Dhule, and Amravati. We also have with us Mr. Karthikeyan S. He is the Chief Naturalist at Jungle Lodges and Resorts and worked with WWF India for over 13 years before that. He's the winner of the Carl Zeiss Wildlife Conservation Award in 2013. Karthik has spent 3 decades on the field and has been published widely in national and international journals. He has been educating and creating awareness on various aspects of natural history through nature camps, talks, slideshows, and nature-based activities. We also have Kedar Gore, who's the director at Corbett Foundation, where he has been instrumental in launching several landscape-level conservation programs, including the campaign to save the Great Indian Bustard. He's also worked with WWF India, Vasant J-Shaped Memorial Foundation, and Terry in the past. And over the last 2 decades, he has won several fellowships and accolades, including the IUCN CEC Excellence Award, South and Southeast Asia last year. A little while later, we'll also be joined by Dr. Rajiv Bhartari, PCCF and Chief Wildlife Warden of Uttarakhand, who's known for working closely with forest communities and encouraging ecotourism through his 3-decade-long career. He's a doctorate in forestry and conservation sciences from the University of Montana and has also spent time teaching at the Wildlife Institute of India. During his past tenure as the park director at Corbett Tiger Reserve, the park has had the highest tiger density ever recorded. So welcome once again to all our panelists. Thank you so much for joining us this afternoon. It's a real privilege to be having this conversation with you. As you can imagine, today's conversation will be dominated by the specter of COVID-19 and what it has done to the tourism industry at large. But perhaps we'll probably have two parts of the conversation. First, talking about getting a sense of what's happening out there in our forests right now. We'd love to know, what's happening in the various parts of the country that you work in. And then we can focus on the topic of the day, which is rediscovering the wilderness of our forests and co-creating beautiful, gentle, meaningful experiences that make the nature-based tourism even more attractive to travelers when they return. So welcome once again, and we can, I don't know if Mr. Saxena has been able to join us. Has Dr. Saxena joined us?
Yeah.
He has.
Sorry,
Can you hear me, Dr.
at that
Saxena?
moment,
Excellent.
I lost my connection. So on behalf of, before
problem.
taking further, on behalf of IUCN International Union for Conservation of Nature, I welcome everyone who are participating today, and especially the panelists. This is a great panel today, and we will be deliberating on the thematic areas on the rediscovering the wilderness of forest. As post-COVID, we are looking for that how to sustain the tourism, in what way the tourism should look like, what can be the new normal for the tourism. These all questions come to our mind. And in this regard, IUCN is organizing a series of, you can say, webinars on thematic areas. We earlier had 2 webinars, and this is the third in the continuation. Earlier, we discussed about the coastal area related challenges, and today we are discussing about the, you can say, the wild forest. Because somehow or other, this zoonotic outbreak of COVID, which has brought to the entire world at a standstill, it has somehow some origin in the, you can say, in the degradation or destruction of the habitat or our disconnect with the nature. So we have to ensure in whatever we will be looking for the various type of the solutions, the vaccines and the medicines. But at the same time, in the ecosystem, we have to ensure the balance, or you can say the connect with the nature. And that is the key to, you can say, the future. We respect the nature. And at the same time, how to ensure this, because people are generally nature loving. They want to see the forest. But in now the post-COVID challenges, how to ensure that they have full respect and connect with the nature. And that is possible only when you expose them to the, you can say, the forest or the nature or various issues related to the environment conservation or sustainable consumption, various type of practices. So now taking further, then in what way some of the new initiatives which have been taken during the COVID with some of the forest department also, like Mr. Tiwari is here, who has worked earlier in the Tadoba. So Tadoba has also started one, you can say, the live safari, so that if you are not able to go, you can see visually the safari. Similarly, other type of initiatives in various zoos, especially in Chennai, has been taken. And younger generation and large people, if we have to showcase them that how the nature is important, why forests are important, what forests provide to us, and you can say the development scenario, because development and conservation has to be, you can say, go together. But development should not be at the cost of, you can say, so much destruction to the, you can say, the habitat or conservation, so that our very existence and the fruits of the development which we foresee, and because of these development practices, if they threaten the, you can say, very existence of ours, in some way the present crisis has some origin, as claimed, in some sort of a zoonotic outbreak. And these are results somehow because of the, you can say, the habitat destruction and other factors. So with this, I think we should ensure that conservation should continue. People should be exposed to the wilderness of the forest. So without coming further in between the other panelists and our moderator, let me also introduce our moderator for the day, Ms. Soity Banerjee. So Soity Banerjee is the project editor at the Outlook Responsible Tourism Initiative, which is an affiliated member of the United Nations World Tourism Organization. She has been a travel and food journalist for over 16 years and has contributed to the Outlook, Outlook Traveler, the BBC, and Indian editions of the Condé Nast Traveler, National Geographic Traveler, and Lonely Planet guidebooks, India Today, Mint Launch, among others. Soity has been invited to discuss ethical tourism practices and policies on several platforms, including the Sustainable Tourism and Destination Access Management, Roundtable at S.C. Johnson College of Business, Cornell University, the Stream by Al Jazeera English, Indian Startup Innovation Camp by World Tourism Forum, Lucerne, and Confederation of Indian Industries. She has been also involved in outreach programs and policy interventions in several Indian states and union territories. So now, further, I am handing over to Ms. Soity to carry forward the today's proceedings of the webinar. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Saxena, for a very kind introduction, and welcome once again to the panelists. Let's begin in earnest. I think this we have only about an hour and a little over that to to have the conversation. So let's dive straight in. Perhaps if I could start with you, Mr. Tiwari. If you could tell us just what have been the major pressure points in the past 2 months in the forest in the regions that you know about. And April to June, as we know, are anyway rather crucial periods for forest communities who exercise their Nistar rights, and there has been a lot of reverse migration. I believe nearly 55,000 people have come back only in the district of Balaghat, in Madhya Pradesh within 1 month. So I can imagine that that's happening across the country. So can you give us a sense of how it is in Maharashtra and what you've been seeing so far?
Yeah. Thank you, Soity. It's a pleasure to be on the panel, and I thank IUCN for arranging this webinar. Coming to what's happening during lockdown in Maharashtra, what we have observed that in some areas we have seen increase in poaching incidences. But it's not equally true for all the areas, but some areas definitely poaching for the small mammals particularly has increased. However, due to lockdown, since most of the time people were not going to forest, there is reduction in fire incidences. So that is one positive thing which has happened. The fire incidences have reduced. And however, we have also noted that illicit felling is also increased in some area because of the people migrating back to their villages. So this was also an observation. However, on grazing, hardly there is any major impact. It is as usual, whatever normal incidences we used to have, that is happening. Overall, we find that dependency on forest has increased. Particularly this year, we find more and more people going for moha collection compared to the number of people which went in the earlier years. This year, we had more people entering the forest for moha collection. So, but this is something like in Chandrapur area where we have the Tadoba is located. So far, we have not observed any such major, even the poaching incidences. We had been supporting those eco-development villages and the guides and the tourists. So far, it has not been observed. But however, if the lockdown continues further and the tourism doesn't open up, and I think more and more such incidences we may be seeing. Thank you.
Thank you. That's good to know. I hope that doesn't, exponentially grow, and poaching doesn't happen. Mr. Karthikeyan, what about you from Karnataka? What is it that you can tell us?
Well, I guess it's very similar here as well. And during the initial days of the lockdown, there was a spike in interactions between wildlife and people, bit of hunting for small meat and things like that because it was not available in the market. There also many of the other businesses closed down, so there was a little bit of a problem there. But then soon, of course, the forest department, which has always been functional right through the lockdown, managed to curtail these incidents as well. So I guess to that extent we are good. There have been no major incidents, so to say, in terms of a threat to the wildlife and things like that. So.
Okay, excellent. Mr. Kedar Gore, if you could also tell us about the areas that you work in, especially, even in the Northeast and West as well.
Yeah. See, I echo the thoughts that have been expressed by my fellow panelists so far. In the last 2.5 months, we did see increased incidences of human-wildlife conflict. I can certainly say so for the Central Indian landscape. Most of the parks in Madhya Pradesh and Maharashtra have seen incidences of human-wildlife conflict. And as Tiwari Saab mentioned just now, people have been venturing into the forest more than probably in the previous years for collection of moha flowers. Now, moha is collection of moha and brewing the liquor is one of the major economies for people there. And with the lockdown and no tourism there and probably jobs have been lost, people do need to look at alternate sources of income. So this could be one of the reasons that they wanted to make best use of the available season, which is collection of moha flowers currently, and then get into the business of brewing liquor. So and this has put them in a situation where human wildlife conflict incidences have increased. But to relate them completely to the lockdown, I think we will need more study this pattern throughout India and then only then work on them. But so far, yes, incidences have increased.
That's good to know, because I think there is, like you said, there is no evidence that this is directly related to the lockdown, but there are a few numbers that have, in Central India, for instance, I believe there is a higher number of human casualties this year than before. So one hopes that this is just that's an exception and not the rule. So to take it to forward that conversation, I mean, it's clearly also as we have seen, forest communities and rural communities as well are rather more resilient than than most of us urban folk. So they are perhaps better off than we are due to the lockdown. Very little, they may not have affected their life as much as it would have for us, but is there any, are there any examples in particular that come to mind for you that you have seen where, which could be inspiring for others, or which could be something that, even if it is initiated by your organization or by the government in your, in the states that you operate? Are there any good examples from your various states that you could perhaps tell us? Maybe we'll go around the opposite way this time. Mr. Kedar Gore, could you perhaps share any positive examples that you have seen in the last couple of months on conservation-based tourism areas? Sorry, I don't mean tourism, because tourism obviously is, yeah.
I know. See, the Corbett Foundation, the organization that I'm working with currently, has been working in Central Indian parks and many other places for the last 25 years. So there have been a lot of programs that we have implemented for the local community, and this has definitely had an impact, a positive impact. And they realize that unless you preserve the area around you, around their habitations, which is a forest. If they protect the tigers, if they protect the animals, there is going to be economical benefit associated with it. So as Tiwari sir mentioned, there have been hardly any incidences of poaching. I mean, poaching does happen every year, and there is a pattern that we can see every year for many incidences. So there has not been really a peak during this lockdown time. So I think this we should take it as a positive sign. People have not really
Geeta,
resorted
are
to
you on
poaching
the
in a large way.
IUCN webinar right now? Are you on the
Hello?
IUCN webinar?
Hello. I think there is
Who
a
is asking this
different.
question?
Never mind. That has been working in. Are there any positive examples that you have seen, Mr. Karthikeyan, in the areas that you have?
The fact that I think I got muted in between anyway. So I was just saying I don't have too much to add to what Kedar has said, but then in the areas that we work, the entire workforce that we depend on are from the local communities. So they have seen the positives of what tourism can bring into their lives and stuff like that, and we have not sort of laid off, or most of the other enterprises in the landscape have not laid off their staff due to this shutdown and things like that. So I guess people do see the positives of indulging in meaningful tourism, and I guess they see the value in preserving the forest, which is so important for their livelihoods as well. So I guess to that extent, we are doing well so far, so good. So
That's fantastic. That's good to know. Mr. Tiwari, sir, Dr. Saxena just spoke about the initiatives that have been happening at Tadoba. Could you tell us a little bit about that and any other initiatives that were undertaken in the last couple of months?
Sir,
Been
please
muted.
mute yourself.
Yeah.
He has been unmuted.
Yeah, now I think it is on. As Vivek already said, and I heard your other two discussions also, so that Tadoba was mentioned. So in the lockdown period, field director has started this YouTube channel on which earlier every day they used to upload their videos, but now I think they are doing it weekly. And they are focusing more on other species like birds and like information about trees rather than, as you are aware, Tadoba is mainly known for tigers. So whenever the tourist goes, you just want to see tiger and nothing else. Now we are focusing more on other species, and it has got very good response. For the time being, it is absolutely free. Anybody can view it. But in long run, if the lockdown continues, so they may consider imposing some fee, nominal fee, so that there is some income to the foundation, and through which we can do some good work for the community which is affected by this lockdown. And also a similar this Facebook Live we had started for in Sindhudurg, where this nesting of olive ridley turtle takes place.
Turtles.
So there also a lot of visitors used to come, but due to lockdown it was affected, and we were showing it live, and even that got a very good response. So that is what in this period we have done. And one instance I just want to point out, in Chandrapur, people are so afraid of coronavirus that they even did not allow the contractor to work a Tendu unit. A unit which was sold, and where Phadi Munshi and contractors comes from some other state, and the local even gave up their own wages and did not allow working of Tendu. So in a way, For the forest, if you see at least less fire, because for Tendu, you somehow put fire also. So that way it is a positive, but anyway, people lost their livelihood. So that is for which I think when Maharashtra, particularly Gadchiroli, Chandrapur, Gondia, these are the districts where a lot of dependence is there from the Tendu patta collection. Thank you.
That's wonderful to know, actually, that there is enough awareness for them to also turn down opportunities of income at a time like this, to think about it in the larger context. So some good work, I think, is paying off now, as as the rest of the panel has also mentioned. Coming now, Mr. Tiwari, to the actual topic of conversation today, which is rediscovering the wilderness. I mean, I know that the fact that you're already exploring avenues through virtually, by allowing the traveler to travel without traveling. But going forward, how do you envision, what do you see the future of tourism being when it opens up? There's a lot of talk that's going on right now about how it will be domestic focused, how it will be about people coming, wanting to be in open spaces, wanting to be in secluded areas, and probably accommodations which are entirely devoted to them or their families within driving distances. So these are some of the thoughts that have been shared widely in the last few days, in anticipation of the tourists coming back, and now that intrastate travel has also opened up. So can you share a few thoughts about how you think tourism should be opened up, and in what manner, what are the kind of experiences, kind of policies that could be that could be looked at?
Soity, as we all know, most of our ecotourism is tiger centric. So whether we accept it or not, but I think it is in tiger reserves, it is only tiger centric. So particularly if you see in Maharashtra, we have Tadoba, we have Pench, we have Navegaon, Nagzira. So I definitely think once the tourism opens up, at least because of the social distancing norm, I think definitely it will be less number of tourists will be able to visit these parks. Because as on now, in Gypsy, you have one driver, one guide, plus 6 tourists used to be allowed. Now, I don't think under new normal, when you have to maintain a social distancing, I don't think 6 people can go in Gypsy. And coming to the limited, as in all the tiger reserve, you have the carrying capacity norms and the number of vehicles are fixed, which cannot be increased. So definitely, I don't think in a vehicle more than 4 tourists can anyway be allowed. So this will reduce the number of tourists visiting to these major tiger reserves. Now I think it's an opportunity to bring the other areas in focus. Like most of you are aware that we have a tiger reserve called Melghat. It is one of the oldest tiger reserve we have, and the most beautiful, very beautiful landscape you have. There, even if since the tigers are there, but because of the topography, visibility is less, so you don't have that gypsy tourism there. So you don't have that vehicle tourism. So that is the area which is so beautiful in the rains. I think that trekking can be one of the opportunity we can have where you can trek in the park area, in which you can also maintain the social distancing. Also in Maharashtra, we have this so beautiful and biodiversity rich Western Ghat, which is again quite a less explored area. We have Sahyadri Tiger Reserve there, so and even the Bhima Shankar Sanctuary. So the Western Ghat is again a beautiful area where I think we should be shifting our focus, where you can use the wilderness can be really explored and people can visit those areas. And apart from that, the other activities, instead of just going and seeing tiger, we can have this cycling, we can have angling, birding, and coastal area we can have kayaking. So these are the, and even this stargazing. So those activities where you can avoid the close contact with other person, I think it's a time that we should explore those opportunities and even bring the lesser known the sanctuaries and national park in focus.
That's wonderful. Thank you, Mr. Tiwari. You seem to have touched upon actually various key, points that that perhaps would, would be, it would be great if the others can also add to. You've spoken about carrying capacity. You've spoken about the diversification of destinations, of finding other places other than the ones that are already very popular. You've talked about encouraging soft adventures from treks to cycling and angling and stargazing and so on, and birding, of course, birding and other kinds of activities which focus on other species, which by default also increase the seasonality of a place, because you are then not looking at only a particular season for tourists to come in. Mr. Karthikeyan, if you could react on that and tell us a little bit about what you think this will precipitate or accelerate in terms of change. He's muted.
Great. So just an extension of what Mr. Tiwari just mentioned. I guess it's high time that we moved away from tiger tourism, though we know that people who come to these places really want to see the tiger. But I guess the onus lies with the operators, resort owners, and the guides and the naturalists to try and get people to look at the wilderness in a holistic manner. Tiger is after all just one species sitting at the apex, but then nobody is really looking at the bottom, and that is what I guess makes it so much more interesting. Insects account for pretty much the largest part of diversity, and not too many people really look at these things. And thankfully with us, at least as far as Junglologist is concerned, we do have several offerings that we can bring to the table. Even within a tiger reserve, we do have, like Mr. Tiwari said, birding, which is some big time that happens with us. We are trying to do tree walks on the property itself, so that the number of trips that people would want to do in the forest can come down. Similarly, we have other properties which are very, very good for herpetofauna, frogs and snakes and things like that, and one which is good for butterflies. All the properties which are along the Western Ghats, like Mr. Tiwari said, are all extremely conducive for tourism, which is away from the tiger itself, taking the focus away. I guess that is something that we really need to focus on, because going to a park, shooting a tiger, and then going back really doesn't do much to the awareness of the tourist itself. And I guess it's important for them to go back a little more learned than what they were when they came there. And I guess I'm sure all of us are excited about seeing tigers. I mean, there's no two ways about that. But then we also need to see and understand what keeps the forest ticking, and what the tiger depends on, and therefore why we should understand the rest of it, the processes, the works, everything else that is part of the ecosystem. I guess that is something that we need to really be looking at. Today, it is largely charismatic wildlife, but then I guess we need to focus really on the biodiversity, the landscapes, the beauty of a place. I mean, December, January, when I go to any of the forests, I very rarely even look at an animal. I just look towards the sky and look at all the bare trees forming amazing patterns against the blue sky. And for 2 hours, I mean, bliss. I mean, it can't be explained better. So that's what I guess we need to get more people to be doing when they are visiting these places, and not just go back disappointed just because they didn't see the tiger. They need to take back with them a lot more than just a sighting of the tiger. I guess they need to go back with more memorable experiences, which would want them to come back to these places again and again.
as somebody who designs these experiences himself, as someone who has been designing them for a while, and you're also training other people under you and mentoring people, is there any, how you already mentioned it, that people are disappointed when they do not, when they come to a tiger reserve and don't see a tiger, but other than is there any particular kind of experience that, like a night walk in the forest, which is not allowed in a lot of places, but I believe it's opening up in certain areas now? So is that something that that you would recommend? Or is, stargazing has been already brought up? Are there, there are instances of people going only to see fireflies in the pre-monsoon monsoon season? So
Right.
is there any particular, I know you spoke about the bay tree so beautifully, so I'm tempted to ask you to describe any other such experience that could perhaps, that is focused particularly on birds or some your smaller species that that you see as successful with all age brackets, including younger people.
Well, one activity which sort of would probably can make a lot of sense to everybody across age groups would probably be nature trails, which need not necessarily be physically strenuous. It could be a short walk. I do this quite regularly when I'm in any of the properties. My naturalists do take guests out on nature trails, and believe me, I mean, we probably walk for half a kilometer, and it very often takes us about an hour and a half, which otherwise would take you 5 minutes if you walked at a brisk pace. So that is the kind of stuff that you can see. And when you're on a nature trail, like I always say, there is no room for disappointment at all, because there is always something to see. Under each leaf, there is perhaps something hiding, and it's entirely left to the expertise and the experience of the person who's leading the trail. I guess things can become a lot more interesting if one can involve the people in discovering things around. I mean, as a naturalist, when I go with people, when I spot something, I don't reveal it to my guests very often. I engage them, try to get them to spot it, and then you see a lot of excitement when they discover it for themselves. So that is the kind of experience people will definitely remember for a long time to come, and particularly if people are traveling with children and with a lot of engagement, I guess it can become very, very interesting and exciting. Nature trails is something that I would really, really recommend for a lot of people.
Right, excellent. Thank you. Thank you so much. And Mr. Kedar Gore, to take off from from where Mr. Karthikeyan left, of course, I want to ask you about the kind of crucial interventions in terms of experiences that perhaps you could also suggest. But to take, because I know that you work with forest communities as well, and there is a lot of livelihood generation interaction with the communities. So is there are there any co-creation possibilities of experiences that that you think can happen in some of the villages? Or how can it be, or also, because a lot of the guides who you are training now, who are taking people on the kind of nature trails that that Mr. Karthikeyan spoke about, because they know the land and they know the species better than anybody else. So they are involved in now in the as guides, as you're involving them from the communities in these activities. So are there any any co-created activities that you think would be should be pushed, which are focused not on primary species, which are focused on smaller species?
Of course, I fully agree with what Mr. Tiwari said and what Karthik just said. We have to think beyond tiger tourism. Unfortunately, when we talk of wildlife tourism in India, it is equated with tiger tourism in the present context. But it should be actually noted that India is one of the biodiversity hotspot countries, one of the 17 countries that have been declared internationally as biodiverse countries. We have world's 8%, almost 8% of world's biodiversity, and occupying just about 2% of the total land area of the world. Now, when we have this phenomenal diversity with us, why are we stuck with only one species? I do agree, and it's definitely very exciting to see a tiger, and I would go maybe 100 times more in the forest to see a tiger. But when we do that, we are completely ignoring the other aspects of forest. As Karthik said, that insects are there, spiders are there, we have huge variety of trees, we have flowering plants, we just don't look at all these things. What has happened is, because of this tiger-centric tourism, we have only focused on few of the tiger parks, tiger reserves in our country. Of course, we have 50 tiger reserves in this country, and about 72,000 square kilometer area is covered. But if you look at the tourism aspect, not more than 10 tiger reserves are really doing well in terms of, so-called tiger tourism or wildlife tourism. So what happens to the other areas? When we look at tiger tourism or tiger reserves, we have corridor forests that connect these tiger reserves. Now, when we work with the communities, as I said in my, when I talked previously, people who have been there around Corbett or Kana, Bandhavgarh, where tourism has been there for the last 20 years, they're very happy. Their whole families are involved in tourism activities and directly, indirectly benefited due to the economic activities that take place. But when you move out in corridors, there is a sudden drop in all this. The people living in those corridors, they will not even listen to you when you talk about tiger conservation. So, unless we involve them, and everyone knows that the major problems will happen, if you talk of tiger poaching of tigers or any such illegal activity, corridors are very hotspots for this. So if this is happening, if this is happening, and because we are not involving the local community at all in this activity, so there is a desperate need, and I would really appeal to the government of India and whoever are the policymakers in deciding these activities. There should be now a policy to look at tourism in a very different way. Now we are into a post-COVID era. We will soon move into a post-COVID era where we don't know how things will move or begin in the already established tiger reserves. So if we want other people, other communities to benefit, we must look at other areas for tourism as well. Now we have a beautiful coastline. Where is wildlife tourism in all these coastal areas? Except for few people going and seeing the mass nesting of turtles in Odisha or some dolphin sightings along Maharashtra coast, I don't think any other activity which is really wildlife tourism and responsible wildlife tourism here. So we are just ignoring other fantastic wildlife species that we have and just trying to milk the same cow again and again, which is not going to happen and which will not work. In fact, there is one more aspect I would like to draw attention of everyone is these tiger reserves have already surpassed their carrying capacity of tourists. Now, how many more resorts and hotels are we going to add in the same locality? Everyone would agree with me that no one will do a proper business if we keep on adding in the same and picking up the same apples from the same basket. Now we have to look at other opportunities. We have to also look at we have several beautiful hill stations. All of us in the summer months we long to go there, whether it is Nainital, Shimla or Mussoorie, Darjeeling, wherever, or maybe Mahabaleshwar in Maharashtra. Now just look at the way these hill stations have flourished. These hill stations people prefer because of the beauty of nature that is there, because of the ecosystem that is there around. Now, if we are completely ignoring the ecological aspects and only looking at the economical aspects of how to develop these hill stations, that's not going to work. Look at the construction that has taken place in Nainital and other areas. I mean, we are living on a disaster. God forbid, if anything happens, there will be lives lost in thousands. There is no waste management system. Water is a shortage. Now, we should create models whereby all these things are taken into consideration. Now, if we look at pre-COVID and post-COVID era, we should take this as a learning. Wherever possible, have consultation with like-minded people and in future take up projects which will be really sustainable and give economic benefits to the local community, but at the same time, they ensure that the local biodiversity and ecosystems are preserved. I think that's it. Thank you.
Right. Thank you so much, Kedar. That was really helpful. And of course, we all, I think, feel very strongly about what you've just said. So, coming back to perhaps, therefore, taking a cue from the last point that you made, maybe I could ask Mr. Virendra Tiwari. Sir, we're talking about carrying capacity. We're talking about creating experiences that are more sustainable, making sure that resources are managed better, and especially now when there'll be more waste. We're all very worried about all the plastics that will be generated in trying to create some trust, sort of factor for the traveler. Without technically bio waste, and these issues will come up a lot more now. But in terms of and there will also be the issue of I mean, there are 2 points here in terms of the economics of what has been spoken about already. One is that when the markets open up again, when people start traveling again, they will want to travel, we hope, but they will not. They may spend a little less. They may want a cheaper experience, but we want them to have a sustainable experience. So that can be a tricky path to walk. And at the same time, there is apprehension that the funds for projects that were already on board, or projects that future projects will be limited, because everybody's facing feeling the pinch and going forward. So there are two, the economy will be such that there will be pressure on the landscape to offer a cheaper experience. So how do you see carrying capacity, cheaper experience, sustainability? How will they find a common space which is acceptable to all of us? How do you see that happening?
Yeah, continuing with what Mr. Kedar was saying, there are two. One, he was mentioning about hill stations. So one example we have in Maharashtra, which is Matheran. So Matheran and Mahabaleshwar both are declared as eco-sensitive zone. And also in Matheran, as most of you are aware, that no vehicles are allowed. So if you want to go to Matheran, all vehicles have to park at a designated parking, and only you have to walk inside the Mahabaleshwar city, Matheran township. So that is where this type of model, I think, where otherwise you see that if you go to Nainital, you go to Shimla, you have such a traffic jam even in those hill stations. So here is one example where one can really walk, enjoy the nature, enjoy the wilderness. So something of that sort, I think, even for the hill stations, we have to see. And regarding the coastal area which Mr. Kedar was mentioning, we have a very successful example in Sindhudurg district at a place called Vengurla. We have one self-help group, women self-help group called Swamini. So what did we have from Mangrove Foundation? We have provided hand rowing boats to them, and they take the tourists in the creek and show around the mangrove biodiversity. And we have built the capacity, and they are even able to tell not only the Marathi names but also the botanical names of those species, and they are able to identify. So this is one initiative which has got many local awards also. So this is one success story which we have achieved through this UNDP GIZ project. So this is one example which we started. This was started in October 2018. Now, based on those experiences, now we have identified total about 7 such areas along the coast. One is Kalinje in Raigad, where already we have this boating etc. is yet to start. And these are the areas where we are trying to focus on mangrove trail, bird watching trail, nature walks. We are also focusing on boating, then kayaking, and also the shore walk and tide rock pool exploration. So these are some of the activities which we are focusing, and roughly we have constituted mangrove co-management committees for the mangrove-based livelihood. We are focusing on that, and roughly we spend about 15 crore a year from the state budget, and we are also focusing on livelihood generation like crab farming, then also you have sea bass cultivation and fishery. So these, and bivalve farming. So these are some of the activities which we are focusing to bring livelihood to the people, which otherwise people think it's a bane, like if you have mangrove in your area. So we are involving people both where the government mangrove is there, the mangrove on government land, as well as in the private land. So this is one activity which I would like to mention, that which we are doing in the coastal area. What you already said, that yes, the budget is going to be a big issue from the government now. Already Maharashtra government has reduced the budget by 67% this year. So most of the forestry budget, I would say, from last year we had about 2,300 crore, and this year it was sanctioned budget was about 1,500 crore, but now we have to deal with we'll be getting only roughly 520 odd crore. So definitely some of these activities which we are doing through state budget will get affected. However, the one good thing is that we have Mangrove Foundation. I think this is one example which I think other coastal states can follow. I think Maharashtra is the only state in country where we have not only a mangrove cell to look after mangroves, but also a mangrove foundation. And this foundation is created from the corpus, from the fund which get wherever there is some destruction of mangrove in any of the developmental projects. So whatever money we get, that 3% or some other money which 2% or 3% we get for the protection of mangroves. So with the coffer, this mangrove foundation is created, and all the money is in fixed deposit, and only from the interest component we run our foundation. So interest itself is of the tune of almost 25 crore. So our coffer is something like 316 crore we have as on now in fixed deposits. So this is virtually a self-sustaining model where we don't have to dependent. We continue the protection of mangrove through this foundation fund. We also support the livelihood through this mangrove co-foundation committees and also this ecotourism. So this is one model, I think, where we don't have to, once this sort of foundation or corpus is created, that itself will become self-sustaining. And once we can work in the villages for about 4 or 5 years, and once their capacity is built, and then we can move out and adopt new villages. So I would just like to, I just quoted what's happening in Maharashtra. Thank you.
No, that's good to know, sir. Thank you. It's just I hope that example can be replicated elsewhere also, because there seem to be far more development projects in suddenly being sanctioned, fortunately or unfortunately, in parts of the country where there is where we aren't necessarily happy about it. But let's hope that there is money to at least generate more livelihoods in some ways. Mr. Karthikeyan, coming to you, because JLR is also a hospitality. I mean, it's looked at as a as an example of combining wildlife and hospitality in the best possible way. You will have to win back the trust of travelers, and a lot of it will also depend on on certain aspects of hand sanitizing, of gloves, of more waste generation, or use of materials or chemicals that are not necessarily, that we don't already have sustainable alternatives too. So how are you looking at, in keeping the forests clean and keeping them still sustainable? How do you foresee this happening, winning the trust back, and at the same time not introducing more waste into a place where waste management is already a challenge?
It definitely is going to be a challenge, and I don't think anyone was really prepared for something like this.
Mr. Karthikeyan,
I guess
have
all
we
of us
lost you?
are. No, I'm unmuted. So can you hear me now? Hello.
Yes, I can. Did you hear my question, sir?
Yeah.
Shall I repeat that?
Yes. No, I heard you.
Did you hear my question, sir? You did?
Yeah, I heard
Okay,
you. Yeah.
excellent.
So it definitely is going to be a challenge. Like I said, I don't think most of us were prepared for an eventuality like this. Yeah, winning back trust of the guests is going to be very, very important for our sustenance in itself. And like you rightly said, we've already put in place a lot of SOPs and protocols that needs to be followed from the time the guest arrives in the camp to the time the guest leaves. Various protocols have been put in place, and our staff are being trained even as we speak now. And I guess, thankfully enough, JLR has a fairly large, should I say, loyal base of guests, and they are very eager to come back to us the moment we open. And we've been flooded by a good number of calls saying that, asking when we are opening and when they can make reservations and stuff like that. But then, yeah, we definitely have to make sure people go back happy, and they're also comfortable, and they don't bring in the virus, and they don't take back the virus with them. So we definitely need to look at those aspects, and we are working on those protocols.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Mr. Karthikeyan, because of course the safety of the community will also be of great importance. Safety of the traveler, safety of the community will be equally important as we go ahead and live with COVID, so to speak. I can see that Mr. Rajiv Bhartari has, Dr. Rajiv Bhartari has just joined us. Welcome, sir. Glad you could join us. As you know, we're talking about rediscovering our own forests, and after the travelers return, and I'm sure that they will. We've so far, just to give you a sense of what we've spoken about so far, we've talked about, of course, we got a sense from Mr. Tiwari, Mr. Karthikeyan, and Mr. Gore about the various forests and what has been happening during the lockdown. And we are happy to report that the over dependence on forests has not been increased significantly during the lockdown, despite drying sources of income. Similarly, I mean, after that, we've of course talked about potentially what the future of wildlife and conservation led tourism will look like, and we're at the moment, we've talked about carrying capacity, about diversification of destinations, introducing going beyond the one animal, one season kind of focus, and also winning back the trust of trust of travelers and of the communities in the coming months. So, sir, to quickly ask you, what is it that how do you see the future of wildlife and conservation tourism in the coming months panning out, and what are the kind of interventions that you think would be key to ensure that it is safe for the traveler and for the communities?
The situation is still unfolding, and but I would like to, even before answering this question, I would like to make a distinction between tourism and visitation. And when we use the word tourism, tourism is from business, and it has a very significant commercial angle. And in wild areas, here we are discussing forest, whereas visitation is activities by people in an area without any planned commercial or money making purpose. And I think the forest areas are going to become even more important not just protected areas or wildlife-rich areas, for two reasons. Because unlike spaces of mass tourism, these places would offer ample opportunity of observing social distance, and I think more small-scaled, small group activities will have greater value in post-COVID scenario. But I imagine that the shift will shift from very concentrated tourism in wildlife areas to wider dispersion. People would prefer to go to places where which may not be the biggest attractions or crowded areas, and I see far greater possibilities of people taking in activities in their backyard, neighborhood, and both in trying to conserve wildlife and in their surroundings, which became so valuable when during the lockdown, because whatever is available in your neighborhood got appreciated, and also opportunities for recreation in forest areas, for fitness, health, and many other concerns.
Good to know, sir, that you see this as a bigger opportunity. Actually, that's really heartening to know that more and more people. We've been seeing surveys that are coming in that are saying more and more people in India want to travel and want to start soon. So there's a question actually from the audience that perhaps I could throw open to all of you. Somebody has asked that the lockdown has impacted wildlife tourism, and the tourism season is high season in some cases is over in a lot of places. Do you see any possibility that the parks would stay open in the rainy season to compensate for the loss? Because that's a contentious issue. So is there anybody who would like to, Mr. Rajiv Bhartari, would you like to respond to that?
Actually, in Corbett Tiger Reserve, we have one tourism zone, in fact two, Jharna and Dhela, which remain open round the year. So as and when the government decides to reopen tourism, these two zones will be open for safaris as a standard measure. But I don't foresee an possibility of opening those tourism zones, which, as per our tiger conservation plan, remain closed during monsoon period.
Right. So yours is a high-profile area. Do you see carrying capacity-related policies, getting changed in the coming months? Is there conversation about carrying capacity that you could share with us?
So there are murmurs again, as it is. The NTCA guidelines require that all tourism accommodation inside core areas of tiger reserves should be shifted out. And I think that this viewpoint will get even greater support in the post-COVID scenario. And spacing would become a very important issue.
Okay. You see that is happening. And what about you, Mr. Tiwari, in terms of carrying capacity? Has there been any discussion so far? Because like you rightly pointed out, even whether it's a safari jeep or, the number of people entering, number of jeeps entering a safari, etc. Those conversations have gained greater momentum. Has there been any conversation in Maharashtra about this? Would you be able to share anything with us on that note? On carrying capacity, sir. Can you hear me? Acha, Achal, I think he's muted.
Actually, he's not muted.
I see. Okay, never mind. Maybe he'll come back. I think he's lost his connection. Mr. Karthikeyan or Mr. Gore? I think we found him. He's back.
Now we are not discussing regarding the carrying capacity in tiger reserve. See, already as per the guideline, you have only 20% of the core area which is allowed for tourism. And again, the vehicle capacity is already determined by NTCA. So we see basically look forward to opening up new areas, as we were discussing, more wilderness.
Diversification.
Parks can come to forefront. So carrying capacity, I don't think will be allowed to increase also. And I think there was a lot of pressure, like you said about opening of park in rainy season. Like we used to get a lot of pressure because I think when Ranthambore keeps it open in Rajasthan, then people give example why Maharashtra cannot open any time. But one thing which we have developed is all these restrictions are for core. But in buffer area, like in Tadoba, we have 7 routes available in buffer, which is open even during the rainy time. So still there is a scope for tourists to enjoy the nature and the beauty. If they insist on core, then I doubt whether core will be allowed to open in monsoon.
Right. Dr. Saxena, would you like to add anything to this discussion about, opening up more opportunities to see the forests and more diversification and newer activities, gentler activities?
Yeah, certainly we really had very good, you can say, some of the best existing practices, maybe from the Maharashtra, the mangrove related conservation initiatives in Maharashtra. And luckily, just before the lockdown, I happened to be in Mumbai and I visited the Mangrove Foundation that they have set up a very good conservation center in Navi Mumbai. And really, it is a very good, and for the urban people, if you have to sensitize them about the nature and importance of the, you can say, migratory birds, importance of the mangrove ecosystems. So that is that has really come up very good. Similarly, we could see the initiatives of the jungle lodges and resorts. They have a number of properties in Karnataka, and also with from Mr. Rajiv Bhartari sir, his vast experience. Now the challenge now here, we are entering into the conversation that to what core area and what type of the, you can say, activities, or you can say people's access be allowed. But now presently, somehow, whatever way we see the, you can say, the new normals in the tourism, we have to ensure there may be some there are guidelines related to carrying capacity or regulation of the tourists. But now we have to be more and more serious to ensure the carrying capacity exactly. If there is a need, we need to look into that, the way we, you can say, estimate the carrying capacity. And accordingly, it need to be strictly followed, because somehow what we see, when we see that there is some important day, you can say near the Christmas or the New Year, all the people at the same time, they want to go at the same place. And just to see that somebody wants to go to the Corbett, people in the coastal area, they want to go to the Goa. So that creates, you can say, a lot of pressure on the, you can say, infrastructure, and with lot of pressures, certainly somehow we are, you can say, able to, you can say, not follow the prescribed guidelines. Now with this COVID scenario, certainly we have to ensure the continuation of the connect with the nature, at the same time to sensitize people through the tourism activities so that they care for the nature. Like rightly told, that presently when we talk of the, you can say, wildlife tourism, we think of only the tiger. If one has gone there and sighted a tiger, then he is happy that his tourism is successful. But beyond the tiger, we see the tiger is, you can say, the apex species. But if the tiger-related ecosystem is protected, number of other species, connected species, biodiversity, they are all protected. So what we need to promote in the tourism, the care for the nature, feel the nature, and their sensitization towards the nature, so that they don't harm the nature, connect with the nature, so that the new normals will be now certainly will emerge when with the norms of the social distancing and keeping, you can say, the place clean, the high norms for the hygiene. So certainly in these all national parks, sanctuaries, and other tourism area, forest areas, so that whenever the tourists visit, so they have to be sensitized about the maintenance of the hygiene, about in the safari, the number of people we can go together, use of the mask. So these are all the new normal. So with these all aspects, we have to move further, that when the opportunities they get unlocked and the tourism is permitted without, you can say, much of the risk. So then, but at the same time, if there is lesser of the risk, but the practices for the tourism should be, you can say, evolved in such a manner that ultimate motto should be to care for the nature, connect with the nature, and feel the nature.
Thank you, Dr. Saxena. Thank you so much. Mr. Bhartari, because you've been away, I just have one question again directed at you. There is, sir, there is a lots of livelihoods have been lost in the, in people who have been working in tourism or gaining any additional income through tourism. A lot of them have lost livelihoods, and at the same time, there has been reverse migration, so that the problem has been compounded by more people coming in without any sources of income. So because you work closely with communities in your in the 30 years of your work in the field, you've got a lot of evidence of working co-working with the communities. So how do you, are there ideas that you're exploring? Are there is there anything you're thinking about to generate better livelihoods? We're talking about all these various experiences. Can we create more and more guides who are capable of showing us more than just the tiger? And how are you planning to do that? What will you do with people who've come back? Are you thinking about them as well?
So I think this situation provides a contrast to assess resilience when we compare people who were dependent on tourism in structured safaris inside the tiger reserves and small community-based tourism initiatives located outside and in the periphery. And if we see, we will find that since these village-based initiatives also involved aspects of agriculture and other economic activities in the village, so they have also suffered losses, but their losses would have been commensurate less compared to the larger commercial industry. And I see that people will begin to I mean, in a case of Uttarakhand, one problem which the state is facing was out-migration and desertification in the villages. So the villages will become more important. The surroundings in the villages will become more important. And many of these initiatives that were struggling earlier to find clients would become more promising because they would offer less crowded conditions.
Right. Thank you, sir. Thank you for responding to it. I think we don't have much time left, so maybe I could just we could do one quick round with everybody, sort of pitching in. I know that so far we've all agreed upon the fact that there should be, the focus should be taken away from the tiger, and other activities should be encouraged and promoted. But are there any two action points that as individuals working in different landscapes within the forests of India, two actionable points that you think you could that should be implemented going forward in the next few months? Maybe start with Mr. Kedar Gore, because I've not had a chance to ask you questions in a bit.
Sure. Yes. Now we have to look at this post-COVID situation in a very positive way, and I see a lot of opportunity. Number one, as I said earlier, that we have to look beyond tourism beyond just protected area network, and as even now Bhartari Sahab has said, other areas have to be explored as far as tourism is concerned, wildlife tourism is concerned. Now, we have to work on public-private partnership models, wherein we can involve the corporate sector as well as the government and the local community coming together and develop sustainable tourism models, which are not really, lavish infrastructure, Because earlier someone you were saying that people do want to experience wilderness, but not by paying very high amounts. So we can create some infrastructure where by paying decently, you can have a very different wilderness experience where people can be going for birding trails, because they can do activities that they actually cannot do in tiger reserves because of various restrictions. So that can be a very different model that we can look at and plan well and execute it. And why I said corporate sector, because CSR is a very effective economical tool that the corporate sector has, and it can be brought into the benefit of developing these kind of different wildlife tourism models. So I think going forward, this is something that all the government agencies and NGOs like us and the local communities have to come together and look at developing wildlife tourism. India has tremendous potential, and I don't see any problem whatsoever in the next few years. We will definitely stand up and come back more stronger than we were before. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you so much. That's very positive, and I really, it's good to know that you feel so strongly about it. Mr. Virendra Tiwari, what about you? Two actionable points that you think should be implemented in the coming months so that tourism is gentler and there is an alternative imagination of travel that is promoted in forests of India.
The first thing I feel is that we have to reorient our staff as well as the guides and the drivers and even the resort owners and tour operator. Everybody has to get reoriented to the post-COVID situation, and the tourists must feel safe. So all our infrastructure like staying facilities, etc., has to be readapted to the new norm so that people are comfortable. The hygiene has to be improved. This is one thing where the capacity building part, we can utilize the next 2-3 months till I think the parks reopen. This is one thing where we would be focusing basically.
Perfect. Perfect. What about Mr. Karthikeyan? Two actionable points that you're looking at?
Yeah, well, I really think we need to promote more of the non-jeep, non-safari based activities, outdoor activities, which can be monitored and then curated well so that people can take back experiences with them. And when I say that, I guess it's also important. That's one point. And the other point which sort of leads to it is training the people who can actually give those experiences. I guess these two are really things which go hand in hand, and I guess it's important for us to be able to use the time to be able to achieve these things. And it's also important, like Mr. Tiwari said, in the post-COVID, when people don't want to be sitting in crowded vehicles, don't want to be in crowded spaces, these are experiences which more and more people are going to be looking at. And we definitely need to look at such options that we have. And in Karnataka, at least, we have a whole lot of trek routes which have we are trying to train guides who will then take people out and in really small numbers and things like that. And these are experiences, particularly the youth who still have the capability, physical capability, to be able to go out and experience right through the year, whatever time of the year it might be, winter or monsoon. The experiences are different. So I guess it's important for us to be really looking at some of these alternates to jeep-based and safari-based tourism, because there's only so much that you can do on those lines. And given the current scenario, I guess there is more scope to look at other areas outside of the national parks and wildlife sanctuaries like Kedar and Mr. Tiwari mentioned.
Perfect. Absolutely. That's fantastic. Mr. Bhartari, would you like to respond, sir, to that question? We can't hear you, sir.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can. Yes, we can.
So during this whole lockdown period, there has been a exploration of different kind of online IT based activities, and there was again talk of using app based interpretation and online viewing, and I think in Tadoba it has also been practiced. People can view animals. And so that is one point that we will need to do, how to connect people through online activities and how to enrich their experience through online activity. And secondly, I think again one has to think through it, but allocation of workforce may change. And what I mean is that these sanitation, monitoring, regulations, etc. So greater manpower may have to be allocated for these.
Right. So that's good news, sir. Then it means more employing more people and creating more livelihoods from within the communities as well. So that's fantastic. And Uttarakhand, of course, has fantastic examples already. And Dr. Saxena, if you could perhaps wrap up today's conversation. But before I hand over the discussion to you, I just wanted to say it's been a fantastic journey today, and I've learned so much about all the various places that you're all doing fantastic work in. I think there is great potential that even in terms of combining culture as an additional element to someone who's coming in as a nature-based tourism, to combine culture and nature in such a way that that the local communities also we have a greater sense of pride, and that they are more involved in all these activities. So I'm really hoping that between digital apps and human interventions, we will have a fantastic, a much better, much richer experience in our forests going forward. So Dr. Saxena, over to you.
Yeah, thank you. And first of all, I would like to again thanks each and everyone for today's participation. We really had a very nice discussion and related to the various challenges post COVID and related to the new normals in the tourism. Am I audible?
Yes, you are, sir.
So IUCN, International Union for Conservation of Nature, already you can say is developing the nature-based solutions standards, and which they will also be launched during the next upcoming World Conservation Congress, which will be held now in January. Earlier it was scheduled in the month of June only. So this tourism is tourism generates a lot of livelihoods. So we have to certainly, when any economic revival package or anything, we have to ensure the livelihoods, or you can say the economic activities, because of the tourism which we have lost. Because tourism provides a lot of linked, you can say various linked livelihood activities. Now with the guidance of, you can say, we have the best of the you can say experienced park managers, and also from the civil society organization like Mr. Tiwari from Maharashtra, and Mr. Bhartari from Uttarakhand, Mr. Karthikeyan from Jungle Lodges and Resorts, Mr. Kedar, Gore, having a vast experience and as a civil society organization, and his Corbett Foundation is also a member of the IUCN. So I would like to request that IUCN in whatever way can support these initiatives, connect the, you can say, the net through our network members with our IUCN's nature, you can say, strength. And we would be happy to support any initiative for undertaking or supporting the developing of some sort of a standards for the revival of the, you can say, tourism activities in a new way. And with these all things, I think some sort of a new standards will also evolve. So with the new normals, and with these words, I again thanks everyone, and all the participants, all the panelists, and also our moderator from Soity Banerjee. Certainly she will take all this discussion forward during this our webinar series, which has been organized by the IUCN. So I thank you everyone. I also thanks the entire IUCN team, especially Anchal, who has been working tirelessly for arranging these all webinar series. Thank you everyone once again. And for the next, I would also request to join for our next webinar series, which most probably will be on the 10th of this month. Thank you.
Right. Thank you so
Thank
much.
you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you all the panelists. Great.